All right. Awesome. Do do do. Bum. Okay. Do do do. Do do do. Okay, looks like we are here and we are live. Awesome. Welcome everybody. So this will be a great reference video for you to watch to learn how the vagus nerve is traveling through your body. This is a very important area to get right because a lot of people, when they miss this key distinction of where is my vagus nerve actually going, if you don't really fully grasp that concept, it's really difficult to understand, like, what are the treatments that you can do, or what could go wrong with it, or did I have an accident with a surgery that cut my vagus nerve? So there's a lot of questions we're going to answer just by showing you visually with, I think, some of the best medical reference imagery on the internet, with my notes on it to show you really where does the vagus nerve go. So awesome. So let's crack into it. So I'm going to go scroll back up to the very top. You're going to see my little face down here. But generally speaking, we're going to be very focused on this. So let's get started here. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is just a general overview profile of the abdomen from the neck down. This is an area that it's really the best place to treat to start, and that's going to be the vagus nerve in the cervical branch of your body. Now you can see that this is highlighted or colored with R. So this R represents the right side and the L represents the left side. So as you can see, I've highlighted in red the pathways of where the vagus nerve is, and the image underlying it that I've used that actually has an animation on it, which is pretty cool, is lighting up in yellow. So you'll see that the vagus nerve is on the right side and on the left side. It's mostly symmetrical, but it's not exactly symmetrical because your whole body isn't exactly symmetrical. But your vagus nerve does follow similar pathways on the way down, generally speaking. And so let's keep on looking. So where does the vagus nerve leave your skull? How does it exit? How does your brain and your vagus nerve interrelate? Where's the entrance and exit point in that place? That is going to be located here, right around this right around this region of your brain stem. This is the medulla, right here. The pons is right here, this big protrusion right here. That's the pons. And right here is the medulla. Got it? And so your vagus nerve exits and enters in through the medulla and exits in and out of the jugular foramen. The vagus nerve travels through a very tightly packed hole in your skull. And there's two of these jugular foramen holes. There's a left hole, there's a hole on the left side, and there's a hole on the right side. And you have the vagus nerve exits like two different, it bifurcates into two different branches. There's the left branch and the right branch. And they go out of their respective holes. And then they go down to the rest of your body. Okay? So even looking a little bit closer, we're getting a little bit more complex. We're going to look at where is the vagus nerve and how does that fit in this very densely packed region of your neck. Neck is a big and really important area. I talk a lot about the importance of neck strengthening. Honestly, neck strengthening is probably one of the best ways to improve the function and performance and state of your neck. It's really the best thing to do. But anyway, let's look for the vagus nerve. So right under here, this is the mastoid right here. This piece of bone is the mastoid bone. And there's going to be this little protrusion right here. That's basically the mastoid bone. And just behind that mastoid, you can actually feel it. If you put your finger on your neck, just behind your earlobe, there's a bone that protrudes off of your skull. So right here, that's your mastoid, and then connected to that is your big muscle on the side, and that's your SCM, your sternocleidomastoid muscle. And your vagus nerve runs right below that. So your vagus nerve is on the left side going down and also on the right side going down, okay? And your vagus nerve is going to be about maybe an inch or so, roughly, about 1 inch below the level of the skin in that area. So there's a, well, inch, maybe an inch and a half. Depends. Some people are like very large, some people are very small and dainty. So it depends on your size, but it's roughly between 1 to 2 inches deep in that location. And then your vagus nerve travels all the way down your neck, all the way down, and your vagus nerve branches off and it goes up to your ear and your throat and then your heart and your lungs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we'll show you more of that. So here's another image of basically the complex wiring going on in this area. Of note, you want to focus on this big blue, the blue vein and the red artery. The blue vein is the jugular vein. It's massive, and it sits just below your sternocleidomastoid muscle, which is actually right here. So your sternocleidomastoid muscle is, in this picture, has been, artistically cut and removed to reveal the underlying circuitry and blood flow in the neck. So you can see the sternocleidomastoid muscle has been removed here. And so here we have the jugular vein in blue, and then the carotid artery right there. And sitting and sandwiched right between the two is your vagus nerve. So you have your jugular, your carotid, and your vagus nerve runs right between the two. So it's protected in that area. It's very cushioned in that local area, which is cool. But yeah, so that's another good reference image. Here's another one. This is just kind of a fun artist's 3D rendering for I believe it's a biomedical company. Electrocore made this. But it, I still get questions of, is there only a vagus nerve on the left? And I'm like, guy, it's on the left and the right. They're like, yeah, I don't know though. I looked in Google and I only saw a picture where it was from the left side of the body and there's the vagus nerve. I'm like, okay, anyway, it's on the left and the right side. That's just how it is. Okay. That's just how it is. All right, guys. All right, so yeah, it's left and right side. It runs in this area roughly. That's not a very accurate representation, but this is just to answer the question, is it on the right and the left side? Yes, the vagus nerve is on the right and the left side of your neck, and it runs down your whole body, okay? All right, now let's talk about the vagus nerve specifically. How is it separated, okay? There's some really important things to know. So your vagus nerve is a bidirectional signaling pathway, just like a highway, right? But this is a little bit of a different type of highway or freeway or speedway where you drive cars. Imagine a freeway where, let's say like New York City is your brain and the rest of the United States is the body. In this metaphor, New York City being the brain and the rest of the country being the body, you're not going to have a freeway that goes 5 lanes of traffic into New York City and 5 lanes of traffic out. It's actually going to be that the vagus nerve is more like 8 lanes of traffic to 2 lanes leaving the city of New York. So that's basically the 80-20 split of the vagus nerve. And so the nerves that send signals down the vagus nerve, only 20% of the nerves in the bundle of the vagus nerve are efferent, meaning they control muscles. They control smooth muscles, meaning these efferent signals control your digestion. So they control the muscles. Your vagus nerve controls muscles in your body, right? And it controls secretion of enzymes. It controls the secretion of hormones. It controls the process of anti-inflammation in your spleen. It changes so much. So your vagus nerve controls a lot of downstream processes. But clearly the vagus nerve has determined, your body has determined over evolutionary processes, that most of the signals that travel on the vagus nerve superhighway need to be things that report information to your brain. And that's called afferent signaling. afferent with an A. Okay? So afferent is an arrow pointing up. Afferent means that 80% of the traffic on your vagus nerve is aimed upwards and going into your brain. And what does that do? Well, it reports the information from it's your stomach sending signals to your brain saying, hey, you know what? You ate way too much food and you need to stop eating. That's a signal that goes up the vagus nerve. Or, hey, I think you ate something that was a little bit too dry and the throat feels really irritated. We should probably try to, let's just focus on the signal that you ate something that was dry and we need to either cough or whatever. But those are signals that go up into the brain stem. And then in the brain stem, it's taking the inputs from the vagus nerve and making little calculations like, there's this much irritation. We should only start the process of coughing when the irritation rises a little bit higher. So if you don't get water, if you don't drink water with an irritated throat, then the threshold will hit eventually. It will build up of dryness in your throat, all signals being reported from your vagus nerve. And eventually the threshold will be ding, ding, ding. And then the vagus nerve will be used as the efferent pathway to send signals to start a cascade of processes of exhalation, forceful exhalation, meaning a lot of breath out through your diaphragm, but also to constrict the throat to force through air quickly to dislodge any dry crumbs that might be lingering in your throat. Okay? That's the process of, what do we call it? Coughing. Okay? So when you have dryness in your throat, the vagus nerve has little sensors all throughout your throat and in your stomach and throughout your whole body. But your vagus nerve is reporting that information of if there's potential discomfort or something wrong to your brain stem. And your brain stem has like kind of this vagal circuitry. There's like a little central computer that's located right up here that integrates all that information. I mean, we're talking millions of signals coming up into your brain all the time from all parts of your body. And then your vagal brain stem is like, I have to make a decision. Do I want to cough, or do I want to vomit, or do I want to swallow water? How do I want to go about this? And that's determined in your brain stem. And then the signals to the command signals, whatever the decision was, is sent down to the body through the vagus nerve. And so having a healthy vagus nerve is really important. And that's why the anatomy is so key, is because when you get problems with this, they can often happen from the neck. So if you have like a really weak neck, if you have compression in the neck, like I showed you, that vagus nerve is so close to these densely packed areas that if your vagus nerve gets pinched, you can try sending signals down your vagus nerve, but there's no guarantee that they're going to reach their target. And it's not just reaching the target, it's also is your body might be in pain and it might be sending signals up your vagus nerve, but if your brain cannot read the signals because the wire is being compressed, then your brain can't do anything, even if it wanted to. So that's why this is such an important thing. And also your vagus nerve controls your metabolism as well. So your vagus nerve is key in the treatment of obesity, and the treatment of diabetes, and the treatment of energy disorders, right? Like chronic fatigue syndrome is 100% related to your body's ability to metabolize and burn and store energy. And if your vagus nerve is not working, then ME/CFS is going to be really brutal, really, really brutal. And so I'm fortunate now to have seen like what do long-term treatments of these efferent and afferent signaling pathways look like. And oddly enough, it seems to fix a lot of these problems. So I will continue. But let's also look at this. So another anatomical reference here that's really important is understanding the difference between parasympathetic over on this side and then sympathetic division. So your body has in this classification, right? We're just going to focus on the two separate autonomic places that your body can be. However, realizing that just yesterday we were talking, or 2 days ago, we're actually talking about your autonomic system is really kind of like 3 specific places. One being parasympathetic, one being sympathetic, and then the third being nothing, meaning it's just background individual neuronal activity, which is the uncoordinated process of your body. So if your parasympathetic system fails, which it can, and your sympathetic system fails, which it also can, and they can both fail at the same time, you're still left with background noise, which is unpleasant, uncomfortable, chaotic, stressful. You can have a body that doesn't have sympathetic, and this is the thing. Why is this important? Because most people think my vagus nerve isn't working, so then I must be in sympathetic, and the feelings I feel are called fight or flight. So there's oftentimes a re-educational process that must happen in my work to try and get people to understand that just because you don't feel like you're in love doesn't mean that you're in fight or flight. You don't have to be in a state of fear. You can just be in a, I don't have parasympathetic, I don't have sympathetic. And that's a state to be in. You can be in the third state, which is basic background neurological activity. That's what it is. So let's focus on this. So let's look at where we all recognize the brain here, okay? So that's the big old brain. Now right here is, again, this brainstem location where the vagus nerve exits. And you'll notice that the vagus nerve exits down here, controls tons of processes in the airways, the heart, digestion, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, intestines, okay? Just that one nerve directly controls those processes. Now, if you are in a parasympathetic state and you have more of a parasympathetic activation, then you're going to see a lot of processes shifting in the body, contrary to the ones on the right side. So one that's really important and really noticeable is slows heartbeat. So when you're in parasympathetic, your heart rate slows to a normal, natural, calm level. When you're in a sympathetic state on the right side and you're stressing out, your heartbeat will accelerate. So your heart rate will increase. And that's the difference between the two. Sympathetic is faster heartbeat and parasympathetic is a slower heartbeat. Fair enough? When you're in parasympathetic, your digestion will increase. And that's natural. That should happen. So when you eat food, then your vagus nerve is reporting again with the afferent signals to your brain saying, "Hey, I'm detecting the presence of food." A lot of this kind of stuff is like kind of basic logic. Like, okay, this is true, then this must be true, right? So the vagus nerve is reporting to your brainstem that, okay, there is the presence of the smell of food and the taste of food in my mouth and in the back of my throat, which is your vagus nerve innervates in your mouth too. So your vagus nerve is in your mouth, and it can detect if there's good food, sweet food, savory food, bitter food. There's a lot of things that the vagus nerve is detecting. And as soon as it detects the presence of that food and the increase in salivary production, right? Stimulation of salivation right here is part of a parasympathetic process. As soon as you have that in your mouth, then the vagus nerve says, okay, that is true. Then the next thing that's going to be true is that there's going to be food causing a little bit of pressure of increase and expansion in your stomach. And that's a second condition. So the vagus nerve goes, okay, I'm detecting the presence of savory, sweet food in the mouth and an increase in pressure in the stomach. That means that I'm eating, right? And so in the brainstem, it goes, this is the next thing that happens. And so then the next thing that happens is that the vagus nerve now sends signals to multiple parts of the body, including the pancreas, to start producing more digestive enzymes to send to the stomach. Do you see how that works? Right? So it's food in the mouth, some kind of an increase in pressure in the stomach, and then that's logically one thing is true, the second thing is true, so then we must prepare for digestion. So it's 1 to 1 to 1. So, when people are like, I have digestion issues or I have whatever kinds of issues, it's like, look at these processes. What could be possibly blocking the function, the logical conclusions in this system? Remember, you have efferent signals that are being sent down to control digestion, and then reporting signals, afferent signals from the vagus nerve that are going up. So if you have a problem with digestion or metabolism or energy, or your body is storing too much fat, right? Because if you're storing too much bodily fat and you're overeating, what could that be? It could be that your stomach, for whatever reason, there could be some neurological damage around the stomach, specifically in the vagus nerve, that no matter how much food you eat and put into your stomach and expand it, that the receptors that determine how much pressure there is in your stomach are not able to send that information into your brain. So you may not actually ever be able to feel full if you have a damaged vagus nerve. And what's the natural consequence of overeating, folks, right? If we're not being politically correct here, if you just simply look at it as a matter of thermodynamics, if you eat way too much food, then a natural consequence of that can potentially be gaining weight. However, it's not just that, though. It could also be that your vagus nerve is reporting that there is an increase in stomach pressure right here, and that's maybe that information is reaching your brainstem, and then your brainstem is sending signals down your vagus nerve to the efferent pathways to your pancreas to start properly digesting the food. But those specific signals going to your pancreas from your vagus nerve, that those have been damaged, and that is why you may not be able to digest the food properly. Make sense? And then if you can't digest food properly because the digestive enzymes aren't being created, then you have another problem, which is your gut microbiome is now left to do the heavy lifting, and I now have to start to process undigested food, which causes bloating and rot in your intestines, and that over time can lead to a lot of really bad problems. Then you get laminal opening in the intestines, and then you get infection in the intestines. Then you get gut-brain axis disorders, and those also directly, if you look at the signaling here, also directly affects the vagus nerve. So you see, when one thing gets out of whack, the whole rest of it gets out of whack. And I can tell you, when we're talking about getting things out of whack, let's talk about the whack-a-mole process that most medical professionals will do, is they now look at you as a cash cow, because if you have one thing failing, then you're going to have another thing fail, and then another thing fail. And guess what that is? There's a surgery in there. There's a bariatric surgery for you. There's digestive enzymes. There's liver pills. There's stomach surgery. I mean, if your vagus nerve is failing and nobody tells you that your vagus nerve is failing and they don't actually treat your vagus nerve, you are a cash cow that is going to be the victim of whack-a-mole surgeries, pills, and lifelong dependence on basically stuff that could help you, but it's not looking at the root specifically, which is, there's a wiring problem in your body. That's it. You plug your computer into you plug your computer into an Ethernet cable, or you plug a USB device into your computer, and if your computer doesn't detect it, then figure out, was there something wrong with the mouse or the keyboard? Is it the USB slot that it's, I put it in upside down? Be logical about this kind of stuff. And this is so simple. You just look at it as vagus nerve directly controls the heart rate, digestion, glucose uptake and insulin production and everything. So yeah, that's why parasympathetic function is important. Now, parasympathetic function can fail. It can 100% fail and can put you in a pretty bad state. So, but yeah, anyway, I hope this is helpful for reference as well. So let's keep on going. Not to belabor the point, but to again show you a different framing of where the vagus nerve goes. Because from an artist's perspective, it's almost impossible to properly draw all the places where the vagus nerve is going, okay? It is so massive, so sprawling throughout the whole body that it would be nearly impossible to accurately draw a picture of just how deeply embedded the vagus nerve is in every one of these major organs in your body. Okay, so I'll just say that as a disclaimer. If you look at this and say, yeah, but the vagus nerve only goes partially to the lung, you know, it goes here and then here. I wonder what's at the tip and what's at the bottom. It's like no. You're totally missing the point. This vagus nerve goes to every square millimeter, every micrometer of these organs in your body. It would just think of it from an artist's perspective, like who wants to hand draw every single little branch of it. So always the vagus nerve never gets the credit it deserves because it's actually not possible to really draw the whole thing. Someday it might be. I think someday I'm working on a project where we're trying to map the whole vagus nerve through the body with artists and digital 3-dimensional artists and stuff. I have some stuff planned for y'all that's really cool. You'll be like, holy cow. But for right now, we'll do the best that we can. So here we go. Vagus nerve, drawing the path down here, stomach, blah, 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 liver. Very big, very important. Another area to focus on here, I talked about this last time, but is the spleen. So the spleen is a really important target for stimulation of the vagus nerve. We see written right here is called the CAP, which is the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. And the CAP is a branch of the vagus nerve that goes to the spleen. And inside of the spleen, the nerve endings of the vagus nerve that terminate, meaning they end, the fingers end in the spleen, when they're stimulated with focused targeted ultrasound, tells your whole vagus nerve system to globally reduce inflammation in your body. So if you have an autoimmune condition, if you're struggling with inflammation in your brain and your body, and you just are kind of stuck in that feedback loop of, I can't seem to break out of this really severe autoimmune condition like rheumatoid arthritis or fibromyalgia or gut dysbiosis, then the thing that most the high-end professionals, the guys who look into this kind of stuff, they're doing spleen-specific stimulation to target the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. And another thing, if you ever encounter someone on the street that has a vagus nerve stimulator implanted in their neck, which there are nowadays about 350,000 humans. Let me say that again. 350,000 roughly, as of today, human beings, not monkeys, not rabbits, not anything like that. 350,000 living, breathing, super healthy humans are now walking around with these implants that are stimulating right up here at the very top of the vagus nerve, all where that information goes into the brain and also where the information sends out of the brain. And by administering these light electrical pulses to the vagus nerve, can essentially regulate all of these important functions. And just by doing that piece of stimulation, it seems to be able to fix almost the kinds of conditions that doctors usually just have to scratch their head at. So that's why this is so amazing, is that by stimulating the vagus nerve specifically and not stimulating anything else, you're able to have treatments for fibromyalgia, for Crohn's disease, for gastroparesis, for epilepsy, for depression, for obesity, on and on, migraine headaches. The list is endless. So you can just see why there's a level of excitement about vagus nerve specific treatment. I mean, am I wrong here in being like, is this kind of like miraculous? And how do millions more people not know about this? Why is it just incumbent upon little old me, little old Sterling, in my office here in America, trying to broadcast to the world? Now you're all being very helpful as far as being here. I mean, our Facebook group right now is nearing 20,000 people based on this work. And I appreciate all the word of mouth. I don't run ads. I'm not on the radio. I'm not going on Dr. Oz on TV, daytime television to tell people about this, because I think they're going to misabuse, the stuff anyway. So it's like, just go to the source and I'll help tell you as much as I can. But this is important stuff. And I think knowing the anatomy is actually really critical. So I'm going to keep on going here a little bit. But yeah, just here's another reference, right? I think that the best way to understand how the vagus nerve works is not to just rely on one single picture, right? Like, don't just pull up one picture of the vagus nerve and go, oh, that's my mental comprehension, and that's where it stops of where the vagus nerve is. It's totally wrong. You have to take snapshots and kind of mentally, cognitively compare them back to back to back to start getting the overlay at different scales too, because you're talking about a nerve that runs through your entire body, but then is massively long and it goes everywhere. But then you have to look at specifically where exactly in these organs does it mainly hit, and you can learn about its function based on where in those places it's touching, and what happens when that specific part is maybe cut surgically accidentally, because that you can learn a lot from medical mistakes. Actually, you can learn a lot from damage, from ripping, from tearing, from toxic damage in the body, of just how important the vagus nerve is. When the vagus nerve stops working, and you can say, oh wow, you got that bariatric surgery implant, and apparently one of the needles just punctured the vagus nerve, and that's why you developed gastroparesis and fibromyalgia and depression, is because of that specific tiny injury to the vagus nerve somewhere deep when you tried to lose weight by having gastric bariatric surgery thing, like a cuff. So yeah, that's kind of like, it's an important thing. You have to think of it like an engineer a little bit. There's definitely an engineering aspect to how to think about the vagus nerve, right? There's biochemical processes, there's physical processes. We're talking a lot about the physical locations of the vagus nerve. And there's other videos we can do about the biochemistry, the neurotransmitters. Other interesting areas are just the cognitive, conscious experience of having a vagus nerve, like focusing on, let's say if you're a wine drinker, a lot of wine drinkers try to learn what differentiates one wine from another wine, what differentiates one state of the vagus nerve from another, and being kind of very specific and back and forth, and kind of understanding how to feel in your own body if you're in one state or another. So that's another, that there's different levels, you see. So I'm primed to be able to see this, because some of my work personally that I do, professionally as my career, is developing computer technology, and specifically biotechnology hardware, physical medical hardware to be used in research for stimulating the human body. So that requires me to have this mind that's capable of looking at the large scale picture, the medium scale picture, and the very deep. I mean, we're dealing with the size, the order of magnitude is like certain wires that we have to solder onto a circuit board. Some of these things you cannot do by hand. Some of the technology that I've had to use in the process of developing ultrasound systems is you have to have a microscope and a laser beam to zap little copper wires to cement them to a circuit board so you can have communication. So, I mean, that's the kind of, I love that. That's like me being in super fun world where I get to change my scale of thinking in a moment from something like a wire that's smaller than the size of a human hair, requiring precision laser technology to to adhere to a circuit board, but then thinking of the larger supply chain of like, how do we get product from, you know, an ultrasound factory outside of Shanghai, shipped to Shenzhen, put into a circuit board, shipped to the United States, and then, you know, shipped out to the rest of the world. Like, I have to comprehend all these things. So I'm suited well to be able to see this, and so hopefully I'm able to share this in a way that makes sense for all of you. But yeah, so as far as like anatomically speaking, I would say this is a great primer. I think this is more than enough for someone who's just generally new or even intermediate to this area to have a better sense of just how much this vagus nerve connects to important parts of your body. So I'm going to go to questions, Q&A. Looks like my freaking video is freezing again, but super sorry about that. I hope this is working. Sounds like my audio at least is good. So let's see. I'm going to go back to... Yeah, I'm just going to go back to some Q&A. Okay, so can you make this so I can share it on my page and share with my neurogastroenterologist? I will absolutely do that. Nicole, I barely salivate. Yep, so it means your vagus... So let's look at that real quick. So if you're barely salivating, then I would scroll back up to this parasympathetic, sympathetic division. So let's look at this. Stimulates salivation, or salivation, not salvation. That's a religious concept. But hey, I mean, I will say, right, since we're on the subject, I think the vagus nerve is the key to salvation too. Think about that. But anyway, so salivation, when your vagus nerve is working properly, you should have good mouth feel. You should have saliva in your mouth. That's a good thing. But if you're not having parasympathetic division, or you don't have parasympathetic activity, your vagus nerve is not functioning properly. There's could be lots of reasons why. We can talk about that more at another time. But generally speaking, it's you fix a little bit at a time, but you get a little shift in all of these areas. So like by just shifting a little bit in the vagus nerve function overall, you prime your brain to be more in parasympathetic more often. And here's the thing. You want to be in parasympathetic function throughout the day, 80% of the day. So doing, like, when people are like, should I stimulate my vagus nerve? Should I be in parasympathetic? Because they might miscomprehend what I'm saying and think, oh, you know, maybe I'm in parasympathetic too much. I highly doubt it. Healthy people, if you look at them, they're in parasympathetic 80% of the time, and they don't deal with the kinds of things that people are, you know, dealing with in chronically unhealthy states. So anyway, yeah, you can see that so here's the thing. Stimulating salvation is a positive act that must happen that spurts from parasympathetic division. However, it would be a mistake to just simply say that because I don't have saliva in my mouth, it doesn't mean that your sympathetic system is active. That's where most people are making big mistakes that are totally making their whole worldview very skewed, because they're thinking, well, if my mouth isn't making saliva, then I must be in a state of fight or flight. That's not true. It could also be that your sympathetic system is also failing, because when things just fail, things just don't work, right? Could it be possible that if your sympathetic system also failed and your parasympathetic system also failed, that it could be reasonable to assume that you also might not create saliva? Like creating saliva is an act. It's like creating life in a sense. You're like, well, I'm not having a baby. It means I'm in sympathetic. No, it could just mean that your body doesn't want to make a baby. It doesn't want to make saliva. It doesn't mean you're in sympathetic. And that's that third triad area that needs to be understood, which is that there are states of your body that exist in a baseline background level of chaotic activity that don't require any external autonomic coordination. That's that third state that most people are getting confused with either sympathetic or parasympathetic. So know that there's a third state where things just fail and you just limp by. You can just limp ahead in life without either. Mindy asks, I'm always in a sympathetic state and it causes a rapid heart rate. Got it. So you can be in a sympathetic state, but it's also, I would caution you against assuming that you're always in a sympathetic state. Okay, let's just take a metaphor, which is a poor metaphor, but it's a metaphor nonetheless that most people could kind of understand. We've all driven a car. We also have heard about like revving your engine too much, having it in a red line. Okay, so let's just take the metaphor of a car and let's actually follow that more logically. If you have a car and you're just, this happened to me years ago, the engine just redlined and it went like this, and it's, you know, the little things in that red spot, and the car is sputtering, and it sounds like it's just heating up, and it sounds like something's going to go wrong really fast. Okay, how likely is it that I could say my car is just going to stay like this forever? Really, forever? You mean you can redline your car for the next hour, maybe, without causing severe damage that would cause it to have a failure? No. A day, 2 days? I mean, when you say always, how long do you mean always? How long do you think your body can maintain sympathetic overdrive? Okay, this is the big problem that people are making. Your body, it's like a car, right? You can be in overdrive, but your car is going to end up failing, and eventually the whole thing's just going to fail. So assuming that your body can maintain sympathetic state for a permanent level of time, for an extended period of time, it's not going to do it for more than 3 or 4 days, and then you get in the state where your body is just going to fail. It's just going to fail on you. And you've seen cases where somebody has cancer. They're laying on their deathbed. They're very sick. They're not in fear, but they're not in parasympathetic. Their body is on the very last rungs of life. So it's actually more appropriate to assume that both systems have failed. There's no coordination in your body. And what can that manifest as? Your heart rate can beat very quickly, even though your sympathetic system is also failing. Because your heart rate is a system that will beat on its own. Okay, not to get too graphic, but if you take your heart from a living human being and you surgically just cut it out at someone's chest and you pull it out, like let's say you're a Mayan sacrificial shaman, and you cut a heart out of someone's body, guess what that heart's going to still do? Boom, 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 boom. Not connected to your sympathetic system, and it's going to still beat. So there's no parasympathetic innervation of your heart, and there's no sympathetic innervation of your heart, and yet it still beats. And then you're trying to tell me that your heart is beating and you're in sympathetic state? Get out of here. Your organs will continue to function absent of any sympathetic or parasympathetic input. And it's more likely that these things just fail, and then you're dealing with background energy, and you would be lucky. You would be better off if you could at least just get some sympathetic innervation, because at least that's going to coordinate processes of your body. Discoordination is the problem. It's not that you're in sympathetic. Because I would believe, Mindy, if we looked more carefully at this, we would find that your heart rate may be beating fast, but your digestion is too slow, right? Or it's too much, or you're not releasing enzymes, or, you have urinary problems or whatever. So you're going to see that there's not a full, you're not fully in sympathetic, and your parasympathetic system's probably failing. So hope that makes sense. Is it normal that I can feel a huge knot where the entrance of the vagus nerve is, and how can I get rid of it? Aylin, that would be your atlas bone. That would be the area where your vagus nerve enters and exits your skull. And now it's on the left side and the right side. Let me go back up to a picture. Here's a good picture. Okay, so you can see right here, this is the C1 atlas bone. You can see me drawing a line through it right here. See that X, the X marks the spot essentially. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So this atlas bone is so close to your vagus nerve, and there are so many muscles that innervate and control this area, that's the area you need to work on. So you need to do work on probably neck muscle strengthening more than anything, and that's probably going to get to the root of your neck problems. And I would assume that if you're having neck issues, then what's going to happen with these knots is that you're going to be pinching the vagus nerve, and you're going to have lots of other problems downstream from that too. So something to be aware of. Becky, with the vagus traveling so many places, it's almost impossible not to have it severed while some doc is doing a surgery. So if that does happen, does the nerve repair itself? Good question. Depends on the severity of the damage, of course. So if you have full damage, full cutting, then no, the vagus nerve is not going to just repair itself on its own, depending on the nature of the damage. But if you have had surgical cutting in the esophagus, in the heart, in the stomach, in the intestines, then there's no doubt that they have cut through the vagus nerve. And all that does is it opens up the vagus nerve to infection, to neurological damage, to signaling problems. I mean, there are a lot of problems that can come from a surgery of the vagus nerve. So it would not be my first choice. If it is something that's happened, there are fortunately things that you can do to repair, to generally promote a level of healing in the body that can promote nerve regeneration. And that's a big part of what we do in this group, for instance, is we really do like to focus on not just stimulating the vagus nerve, which is like electricity will stimulate your vagus nerve, but will it repair your vagus nerve? Probably not. So can you get some momentary relief initially from electrically stimulating a nerve that's damaged or severed? Yeah, you can pretend, you can fake it, but does that promote long-term nerve regeneration? Absolutely no, it does not. It's a very short-term thing to do. So our group is more primed for medium. Well, obviously we get short-term gains because that's what we like people to get instant results, but we're more also primed for what does the medium term look like? What does the long-term process look like? And so that's another important question to be asking yourself is what I'm doing right now giving me momentary relief at the expense of my long-term neurological health? And there are things out there being promoted in other Facebook groups, just so you know, that are not necessarily good long-term solutions. Fair enough. Okay, and then Aylin asks, can the vagus nerve be measured from the neurological doctor like other nerves? Yes. So if you've ever gone into a doctor's office and they put that tongue depressor on your tongue and they have you go, and say, and they look at you in the back of your throat to your uvula, and when you say, your uvula should rise up and down unilaterally, like it shouldn't deviate to one side or the other. That's a form of your doctor inherently knowing to measure your vagus nerve, because that is a function of your vagus nerve, is to control the muscles, the efferent muscles in your neck, in your throat, that control the raising of the levator patini soft palate muscles in the back of your throat. So yeah, your doctor inherently does have training on how to test your vagus nerve, but it doesn't go super deep. And I doubt your doctor's ever mentioned to you that that's actually a vagus nerve test. How many of you have known that? And when your pupils are dilated, when they put the flashlight in your eye and see if your pupils will dilate or expand or constrict, that's a test of your autonomic system. I'll show you right here, right? So we look at this. We say when your parasympathetic system is active, your pupils will constrict, meaning if there's light in your eyes, your pupils will constrict. They'll get smaller. And then when you're in sympathetic, your pupils will dilate, okay? And when you're in the third state, they can do one or the other or do nothing, right? So it doesn't have to be, you are not locked into either parasympathetic or sympathetic, right? So just know there's always a third way, and the third way is almost a complete breakdown and a failure of the coordination, the centralized coordination between all of your systems. And that's not a good place to be. Sympathetic is not a bad place to be. When I'm at the gym, I'm in sympathetic. I want my heart rate to be up. I want my airways to be open, sucking down oxygen. I don't want to be digesting food and needing to run to the bathroom every 5 minutes. I want my body to be focused on the task at hand, which is sympathetic dependent activity like exercise. But when I'm home and I'm eating and I'm hanging out and I'm watching Better Call Saul and whatever, just with the partner, I want to be in a parasympathetic state. I want to be relaxed. I want my heart rate to slow down. So there's times and places for these things. So anyway, all right. Well, I hope that's helpful. This will be a great reference for people. I will be uploading this again to probably YouTube or to my Facebook page so that people can share this widely if they need people to go out and be able to see what this is and all that stuff. So I hope this has been helpful. But yeah, look forward to the link coming out soon, maybe later today. And I hope this has been helpful. And we will be doing these live kind of trainings every week. So come back for more and make sure you bring some questions into the Facebook group. So thanks everybody so much. This has been Sterling Cooley, the founder and CEO of the Vagus Nerve Stimulation and Repair Program. We do work specifically with people. So if you are in need, please come to our Facebook group, join up, learn more, and all that kind of stuff. All right. Awesome. All right. Great. Good to see you, Becky. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.